First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to the IWCS for the opportunity to come to China and to demonstrate this instrument and meet all of these wonderful cultures and see all these other musical instruments and wood carvers and turners, and it's just absolutely fabulous event. So thank you very much to Mike Howe and everybody at IWCS. It's wonderful. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Uilleann Pipes. When I'm playing the pipes, I'm using my two elbows. So one elbow is pumping a bellows and the other elbow is squeezing a bag. So the Uilleann Pipes are in the bagpipe family. They're the most evolved of all the bagpipe instruments that are found around the world. And bagpipe instruments exist everywhere throughout Europe. In Germany you have a doodle-sack, in France the cornemuse, in Spain the gaita. They exist in Africa, they exist in Asia, throughout the world. So the Uilleann Pipes first appeared in this form in the early 1700s. In Ireland there are Celtic crosses which have carvings of bagpipe type instruments which are older than 1,000 years old, but these instruments appeared in the early 1700s. I suppose the most famous bagpipe instrument in the world is the Scottish bagpipe, but these would have evolved probably from European instruments such as a French instrument called musette de coeur, and also another instrument known as the Pastoral Pipes. First thing is who used to play these pipes? They're a very expensive instrument, and they probably would have cost maybe half a year to a year's wages. So the people who played them originally were gentlemen, lords of manors. Ireland, the staple diet of the working class was always the potato, and in the mid-1800s, in 1847, there was a potato famine, and it devastated the population. Over 1 million people died, and about 1 million people emigrated. As a result, there was lots of people lost their houses, and a lot of the wealthy landowners lost their wealth. So the musicians, a lot of musicians, itinerant musicians, became pipers, especially if you had, for instance, if you were born blind, one way that you could make your living was to become a musician. If you were an itinerant musician, you would travel the countryside. If you had a good reputation, you may be invited by a local lord to come and play in his house to entertain his guests. He would throw parties and you would be the entertainment. And if some of these instrument players were also composers, and they would write tunes to honour the lord who has given them a job. As a result of this poverty and especially the famine, a lot of Irish people emigrated, in particular to the United States of America throughout the 1800s, and of course their music travelled with them. And this was quite important for the development of the Uilleann Pipes. What was happening in the United States with all these new cultures arriving into the country, it's strange, but when a culture travels to a new place, it nearly becomes stronger. It's more appreciated by the people that bring it with them. So for the Irish population, they had a renewed interest in their own music, and at the same time, music halls were starting to become popular. This of course was before they had microphones and amplification systems, and the older versions of pipes, which predated the famine times, they were pitched in a lower key than I'm playing here. The pipes I play here today are pitched in the key of D, but before they would have been called flat pipes. They would have been in B, B flat, C or C sharp. One consequence of a lower pitch is they're also more silent, and this was a problem in the music halls because you need to project your sound out, but these quiet pipes didn't do the job. So a development happened in the Uilleann Pipes history at this point where they moved the pitch up to D, which also opened up the bore of the instrument and actually made it louder so the sound would travel out to a hall of people. There were some famous makers in America that had come from Ireland, and these were the people who developed this new type of pipe. And in fact, it's definitely the most common pipe now is pitched in D, although the sound of a flat set of pipes is beautiful, and when you hear the two together, there's a very clear difference. With the problems with the famine and the decline of the Irish economy and everything which happened, also the culture was declining, the language was dying away. There was a mini revival interest in Irish national culture in the early 1900s, and in fact the old name for the Uilleann Pipes was actually Union Pipes. They're not really sure why. It's possibly because there's a main stock and there are drones and regulators unioned in the main stock. But the problem for the nationalists at the time was that the word union sounded like the Act of Union, which was the act of Parliament which tied Ireland to English rule, which wasn't very popular. Some clever musical historian thought that the word union sounded a bit like Uilleann, and luckily Uilleann meant elbow, and it was clearly used, so they were happy to adopt the new name of Uilleann. But if you look at older texts, they're always called Uilleann pipes, and quite often if people are talking about the flatter pitched pipes, they'll call them Uilleann pipes. So the decline in the music kept going right through the 1900s. In 1968, some men got together, some people who loved the pipes, and their mission was to try and save the pipes from extinction. So they sent out a call all over Ireland to anybody who was known to be an Uilleann piper, and they asked them to come to a meeting. Only 48 people turned up at this meeting, so perhaps there was twice that number in the country, but it was definitely within one generation of extinction. Of course, for an instrument to survive, you need to have players, but you also need to have makers. And I think at that time there was only one maker of Uilleann pipes. This meeting took place at the last moment that would save the instrument. So they formed an association called Na Píobarí Uilleann, which is Gaelic for the Uilleann Pipers Association. And since 1968, Na Píobarí Uilleann has been extremely active in promoting the instrument, both the playing and also saving and preserving old instruments, copying the dimensions of old instruments, and also encouraging new makers. Their efforts have had fantastic results. So from the original meeting of 48 players, there are now 7,000 members of Na Píobarí Uilleann around the world. And also I am one of a new wave of Uilleann pipe makers, and perhaps there are between 30 and 50 makers around the world. So I'll now talk to you a little bit about making the Uilleann pipes. There are three main components. There is an air supply, which is supplied with a bellows. In the Scottish bagpipes, you blow into the bag, but the problem is the moisture from your breath would damage an Uilleann pipe reed. So for the Uilleann pipes, the air is supplied by a bellows. The wood that I use, this is an example of elm wood. Elm is a wood, unfortunately it died out in the 70s and 80s due to Dutch elm disease. Luckily my brother-in-law has salvaged lots of old elm tree trunks, and he supplies me with the wood. It's particularly beautiful wood. I love the fact that it's native, and when I design my bellows I try and maximise the exposure of the wood. So we have a pad, but I sink it in behind the wood, and all the belts are sunk in behind the wood, so you see a lot of the beautiful grain that's possible on the wood. The next part of the pipes is the bag, and it's made out of cowhide. The bellows pump into the bag, which is a reservoir for air. And the next probably the most important part of the pipes is the chanter, and this is made out of Indian ebony. So to have a good sounding instrument, you want to have a very dense wood, very heavy, close grain wood, and ebony is fantastic for this. Also, there are decorations on the pipes. You can see the lighter coloured wood. This historically would have been made from elephant ivory, but of course this is not possible anymore. Some makers use imitation ivory plastic, but I much prefer to use a wood, so I use boxwood, which is a pale coloured wood. I have some models here, and you're free to have a look at them afterwards. This is kind of how the chanter starts off as a piece of ebony like this, and what I need to do is to create a conical bore through the centre of it. This is done, I use gun drills, which are long, narrow drills, and I create a series of steps inside the piece of wood. And then I use a tool called a reamer, which has the correct shape cone, and I introduce this in to create the shape inside the wood of the cone that I need. It's very important that we copy the old sets, because the old makers were masters of their art, and the knowledge almost died out. There are very few excellent quality old sets, so these are measured very carefully so that the skill lives on. And the magic part of the pipes is really the reed. So the pipes, all the different components, maybe for this set here is between 2 and 3 months work. But it's actually these little things called reeds which make the sound. They take about an hour to make. There are two types. So this longer one is for the drones. This other shaped one is for the chanter. It's basically 2 slivers of bamboo cane tied onto a piece of copper tube. And these are the things that break your heart when you're trying to make them. In a full set of pipes, there are 7 reeds. So we have 3 drones, which give a constant background noise. You have the reed in the chanter, which plays the melody, and then you have the extra keys, which sit across my lap, and these are regulators, which add chordal accompaniment and harmonies, rhythms. There's 2 types of Irish music. There's slow airs, which are the melancholy, sad airs, which talk about emigration and lost love, all these sad themes. And then, of course, there's Irish dance music, which is jigs and reels, and it's quite upbeat. And actually, I'm going to hopefully be joined by my good mate from Oz. David is going to join me on the didgeridoo. This is probably a first time that, definitely the first time in China that Uilleann Pipes and didgeridoo have played together.